Key takeaways. I want to talk about MABC, that's our Milwaukee Asset Building Coalition, and ways to work. You'll hear some talk about history, because I am a student of history, and I think our history has impacted the ability of some groups to develop assets. Understanding primary barriers and understanding asset development data about low-income families, and then identifying key approaches. And I'll focus probably most on the key approaches to asset development for low-income families. A significant number of people in the United States have little or no current relationship with a financial institution. Now, there are many reasons for that. Historically, we painted people who are poor as undeserving, as the underclass. President Reagan talked about the truly needy versus the needy. He wanted to say that the elderly and certain people were truly needy, and then sometimes, depending on the politics and his agenda, he would change the grouping. And it might not be the elderly that year. It might be the disabled or people with handicaps. Or it might be children. But it was a political term. The social scientists Ken Arletta and Nicholas Lehman, they started this idea of the undeserving poor and went into African American, what they term ghettos in Chicago and other places, and identified people living in poverty as being lazy, immoral, lacking family values. And so who's going to help people who have been termed like that build assets? Because you question whether or not they would use them wisely or whether or not they would value them. But other reasons for the current relationship of people not having assets and also not being banked or connected with financial institutions is economic. They aren't attractive to many financial institutions. They're becoming more attractive. Banks are now looking for ways to have products that really attract the poor. The structural issues of course, and it's been mentioned before, bad prior experiences, poor credit, predatory lenders, lack of identification, and then experiential. Unfamiliar with banks. A lot of people in the Central City, and I'm not talking about everybody, but many people in the Central City don't trust banks. I was amazed about a year and a half ago, SDC had a public hearing on predatory lending. And I went there thinking I knew what the testimony would be. I thought people would come in, poor people, people of color would come in there saying, we hate these predatory lenders, we hate these groups. And instead, in the front two rows were all the people who worked for those institutions. And they didn't get up to speak at all. They didn't say a word because most of the people who came up to the mic were poor and were people of color. And they said, and I was quite impressed but disappointed, they talked about it being a choice, it being a right. They were talking the language that Americans talk. It's my right to choose where I get a high interest loan from. It's my choice that I go to a place that will take my money and overcharge me and make me pay back not double but triple. They talked about it as a right. And they talked about people who wanted them not to go to predatory lenders as trying to take away their rights as Americans. As a public relations or marketing tool, I thought that was fabulous. I was very disappointed, though, that people were actually talking about that. They talked about how financial institutions in the past had let them down. They felt discriminated against, they felt they weren't welcome. And so it's all of those things and more that end up or result in many people who desperately need a financial home not having one.